Settle in, because we've got a story. I'm Nell.
And I'm Rose, and today we're bringing you the tea.
Across eras.
So, what got me thinking about this week's story was a discussion about Tudor history and how it's portrayed on TV.
Ooh, okay.
Always an amazing topic. There are a lot of great things and a lot of terrible things involved. And I know that I'm as guilty as anybody of just roasting someone for having an interpretation that I don't appreciate.
What the Kardashians were?
No, right. It's a similar level of passion. Like,
Yeah,
the way that somebody's going to discuss, a Kardashian sports bra. It's the same thing with shoes. And so,
yes.
So what this discussion was the HBO version of The Tudors, when Gabrielle Anwar does a beautiful job playing Henry VIII's sister. It is, I assume, not her fault that they actually combined two people into one character for her.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not her fault.
Absolutely. That was the little side part of the discussion. It was just like, oh, that's absolutely ridiculous. And, well, it is really kind of crappy to cut somebody's existence out of the narrative. You can kind of a little bit see why it happened, because they're focusing on this very, very specific time period. Henry falling in love with Anne and deciding that he is going to make this major break with the church in order to get things done. So I can understand why they didn't want to try and get the most accurate side stories possible, because they're focusing on the main portion. Both of Henry's sisters get combined into one person, and so she's being sent off to marry the King of Portugal.
Okay.
That's apocryphal, but I think that's kind of a graceful way to address that it's two different people.
Yeah, okay.
Because, the first sister married the King of France and the second sister married the King of Scotland. And so her being sent off to marry a much older man for dynastic reasons, like that happened to both sisters. So
okay.
This was a good way to represent that. And so she's being shipped off to Portugal to marry this guy 50 years her senior and bear him sons. And
ew.
Dynastic marriage, it's a different thing. Marriage for love is so rare. I think that's why it's so much a part of our storytelling, particularly at that era, because it's sort of like on the same level as fairies. Like, you saw love? Really? What's that look like?
Not like this.
This wasn't about combining farms? Really? So she's getting shipped off for dynastic reasons, and Charles Brandon, who was the, I think, first Duke of Suffolk, he was one of Henry's, big confidants throughout his entire life. The best friend narrative that they throw out in the show, I don't think is beyond the pale at all. They spent a lot of time together.
Okay.
They had Henry Cavill playing him, and so, it's
I know.
The Witcher as Duke of Suffolk, which I highly approve of.
Yeah.
And they end up just diddling their brains out on the ship on the way over there. And that, okay, probably not a thing. But he did actually marry one of Henry's sisters without permission, which for anybody that's not even just royalty, but royalty adjacent is so rare and so just, oh my good gravy.
Who married them?
Do
you know?
Oh my goodness, I can't actually remember who did the actual ceremony. They got married without permission, out of town, come back and they say, hey, we're married, which is, it's so rare. Mary Carey, Anne Boleyn's sister, Mary Boleyn, after she'd been thrown over by Henry, once Anne is queen, she goes off and marries some soldier, and that's where the Carey comes from. Shows back up with a husband and is pregnant, and just gets rolled, because even though she's Henry's cast-off mistress, but there's a lot of guys with a lot of money that are willing to hit that. And so her family kind of just, we could have done so much better out of this.
Being a woman.
Just like, that's again, like, you married for love. What's wrong with you?
Are you caught up on ghosts?
Yes! Oh my gosh!
Okay, so, yeah, the whole, you should get a prenup. How dare you marry for love?
Yeah.
I love that the ghosts are having to deal with this. Anyways, no spoilers, sorry.
Yeah, apologies. Great show, highly recommend it.
Indeed.
Alright, there's this scene on the way to Portugal where they're diddling their brains out, and she's wearing these ridiculous looking shoes. They look like Delia's catalog worthy.
I keep meaning to bring over a pack of fuzzy socks that I bought for you. They're Delia's brand.
Oh my god!
Yes! I bought everyone a pack as soon as I saw them.
For the uninitiated, the Delia's catalog was like teenager pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Not like you could afford any of it.
No.
But you'd page through it for a whole month, just designing yourself into, baby stardom, which was the style.
My sister had her own phone line, like landline, in her bedroom because she tied up the phone all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The day the Delia's catalog arrived, she took it into her room, called her friend Rachel, and those two would go page by page through the entire catalog.
Oh my god.
That's what we did before Faced.
I actually had... Yeah, no, you know what? No, seasoned. We are crones. Ooh. We are here to impart wisdom. I had my own phone line on pure screaming accident, because when my dad had a second phone line put in because we had internet, and everyone was tired of getting kicked off of the internet the minute somebody picked up the phone.
That is my sister's story, yep.
Mm-hmm. Or I need to use the phone, get offline. He had a dedicated phone line put in for the internet, and then for no reason at all, the tech put an outlet in my room, too. I mean, which was across the house from my dad's study, where the only computer was. Nobody ever said anything, and then I had a phone line just because I didn't rock the boat.
Genius!
Just once in a while, sitting still, totally enough.
Okay.
Yeah, so these Delia catalog shoes, basically they look like platforms with a cap toe and almost like a Mary Jane attachment. They're almost like those cloggy sandals, 4-inch platform.
They're back in fashion.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure I just ordered a similar pair.
So the discussion that I was reading was just like, oh, that's just so ridiculous. Why would they put her in that? That's already kind of an apocryphal scene anyway. Why are they doing this? But chopines, which we're going to be explaining here in a second, they were actually a very established style at that period and much before. They're wide-ranging. They existed, for reasons we don't really think about. So what a chopine is that platform shoe.
Okay.
That looks like it came out of the Delia's catalog. There's a lot of different versions of it. I'm pointing to a picture here. Those are traditional chopines.
Is that a silver chopine?
Yes.
I mean, look, I couldn't wear it because I would fall. It kind of reminds me of a cross between those high heels that don't have the heel. The whole sole's just in the front.
Right, it's completely solid all the way through.
Yeah.
We'll put a picture up.
But it's flat, and also like the ones that you use when you have to walk on like marshy ground.
Right, and that's actually a great clue. So the reason that chopines existed more than anything was because every street and sidewalk that you're going to find on any kind of populated area is going to be covered in shit. Like, I apologize for the aesthetic
but
sadness.
She means literal.
Literal shit. You do not have sewer systems. You do not have very effective waste removal services. I'm not going to say none because the lant men were a thing. So lant is a historical word for urine.
Yep.
And so you could actually pay the lamp man to come around and take the household urine for the week because the fullers used it, who are the processors of wool. The laundresses used it. Laundresses had kind of a reputation because you could always see their ankles, which is very, oh my goodness, they're showing so much skin. They're lifting their skirts up and they're literally treading in giant tubs with urine because that's what gets out certain stains. If you want something bloody out of your shirt, you're treading urine. Bleach doesn't exist.
I'm so thankful for Target right now.
Yeah, and so not only do the laundresses show an untoward amount of skin, they often smell like urine. So when someone says, oh, he's sleeping with a laundress, it's actually a little bit of a dig.
Ouch.
It's
okay.
Which the poor laundresses, they're just trying to make a buck. But yeah, so you do have waste removal systems. You have the night soilman, which I'm not sure when that phrasing comes in.
I definitely know what that is based on a book.
Yeah.
I don't remember which book.
They're coming around each night, because of course you do the bad jobs when no one can see you, and they're emptying out the latrines by shovel into bucket to then go usually to the tanners, because tanners are using any excrement available to process your leather. Because again, you don't have the acidic elements that we use today to kind of break those fibers down. If you're a caveman, you're chewing it. Obviously, ain't nobody got time for that. So the solution to not chewing your leathers to death is using shit and often brain matter to process it because it breaks down the fibers.
The moral of that story is vintage clothes are amazing. Just watch out for how vintage they are.
The level of vintage matters.
Okay.
Yeah, so to combat this, if you have a buck or two, you're already wearing nicer clothes because you have a buck or two, and you definitely want to keep them out of the shit that is literally everywhere. So you wear chopines. You wear basically what are normal shoes that are just elevated up onto blocks. And these are really ubiquitous. I think the most famous instance of them, or at least I think the most interesting, is Venetian courtesans.
Okay.
They were extraordinarily famous for having chopines. They were extraordinarily famous for just everything being fancy, having these huge elaborate gowns.
Yeah.
But they also had to have servants on each arm so that they could totter around on their gigantic platforms that made them tall and impressive and improved the drape of their dress. But you still have to have help to walk. You're very right about you would fall off of those without your servants to assist. So even that is kind of a look at all this status that I have. These are my choking balancing servants. Obviously, we use them for other things. We're not profligate, but
I've always seen movies where, old westerns or something, and I'm like, there's no way these ladies' dresses aren't getting so dirty. But it wasn't until we watched the TV show Hell on Wheels, that was when I first remember being like, they're actually showing it, how dirty the streets are. And so all of these women's dresses are just so muddy on the bottom.
A muddy hem is almost unavoidable unless you take extraordinary steps.
Literally.
Right, so who's going to have chopines at that day and age? Absolutely Henry VIII's sister. So, it looks ridiculous. It looks like it's an absolute weird anachronism in the show, but that's actually them being a little bit more historically accurate.
That's fantastic.
So it got me thinking about other ridiculousnesses. I think something really interesting about period TV shows and movies and things in general, they will all style their costumes to whatever aesthetic is popular at the time. And that's normal and honestly not something that offends me.
Popular in the time period?
The filming period.
Oh, okay.
Like the Pride and Prejudice with Keira Knightley, the dresses in that, while not really terribly accurate to the time period they're portraying, they were very fashionable at the time that the movie was filmed. The kind of like straight line, well, I always call them Josephine dresses.
I know exactly
what
you mean.
On pure waist, it's supposed to make you look pregnant unless you are read thin, which was also very popular at the time.
Yes.
And side note, I call them Josephine dresses because that style was actually popularized by Josephine, Napoleon's wife.
Yep.
Because she was constantly trying to look pregnant.
Oh, gosh.
So it is actually supposed to make you pregnant. So all you ladies out there like me that hated on pure waist styles because of that, you're not alone. It was doing its job.
Okay.
And they still want to appeal to their audiences. That's how they're selling tickets. And so they're styling it towards what's going to be aesthetically pleasing to their current audience. But anytime they're trying to make somebody look super foreign, they end up throwing it back into a much more historically accurate style. It made me think of the scene in Ever After at the very end. Sorry, spoilers, it's been 20 years. If you haven't seen it, it's not my fault.
Yeah, it has been that long. Okay.
But at the end of Ever After, when they're walking down the aisle of the Grand Throne Room, and, the stepmother's about to get hers, the stepsister's are about to get hers, and all of the very stern nobles that are lined up and down the aisle waiting for her to get her comeuppance, they're all in much more historically accurate styles than the entire rest of the movie. Because they're all the foreign dignitaries. They're all
okay.
Or in that version of the Tudors, when they bring in the members of Anne of Cleves' court, they're supposed to look very German, very foreign, but they're actually in more historically accurate styles because kind of in contrast to whatever interpretation they've done for the main cast, they have to contrast it, and it almost always ends up being the more historically accurate because it looks more foreign.
That's hilarious, but it also makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Yeah. So I thought the chaperone hat, I think that's probably my other favorite example of just completely ridiculous history that is so very true. And the evolution of this hat, I think, is probably one of the more interesting function to form stories.
Okay.
In fashion history, the best example of it is Jan van Eyck. It's conjectured to be his self-portrait, which I think I believe. It's one of the most ridiculous, poofy confections. It looks very academic. It's almost like a turban, but like you were drunk when you tied it.
It looks like a giant bed sheet that somebody was trying to put on to be Professor Quirrell from the first Harry Potter movie.
That's an excellent, Professor Quirrell's hat was definitely a chaperone. That's a really great example.
But as a giant sheet. It's kind of wadded.
And Van Eyck is a great reference point for fashion history anyway. The Arnolfini portrait is, that's something you'll see in every art class. Obviously you don't have photographs, you're trying to create a historical record, but you're also giving interpretation to the person that has ordered this portrait, so he wants to look rich. Sure, you're going to show his very pregnant wife in an elaborate, sexy, lush fabric, all of your belongings around you. That's you doing homage to your patron. And so I consider his version of the chaperone to be the kind of peak chaperone. But it's a really interesting evolution of fashion. So the way that the chaperone came to be was from a hood.
Oh,
Earliest style of head covering. You have a hood that kind of covers your shoulders a bit and covers your head, gets your hair out of the way. keeps sweat out of your face. You're mostly using it as a insulation layer and weather protection. And so that's pretty ubiquitous. You see that on farmers and tradesmen all over the world.
Yep.
And then I guess the evolution that I'm talking about is like French and English. This is open to interpretation in the wider world.
Okay.
But at least in French and English medieval fashion, and I hesitate to call it fashion. It's what the guy who's working in the field put over his head because he needed it. Like, it's very different from how we change our clothing styles today. We don't go, I need pants, so that I can walk 3 days to go get the mail or something. It's not the same type of functionality. But so the guy in the field, he's got his hood on. Everybody's, oh, the nice hood, Jerry. And Jerry decides it's too hot, so he whips it up over his head and uses the shoulder bits to wrap around and kind of tie it. Now
that's what it looks like.
Now he can carry it. He doesn't have to worry about sweat. He has it if it gets cold or rainy, but in the meantime, it's really just a hat. And the hood shoulder tie thing, that's basic. As you are trying to maybe be a little bit more fashionable, maybe Jerry had a great couple of years, and his old hood was fine, but he wants to have a little bit more panache, so he does this new slimline hood with something called a liripipe, which is basically like attaching a sleeve to the back of it. And I think jester hats are a good example of that, like, but just, take the jester arms down to one. That's a liripipe. That's also going to help you out when you're trying to tie the thing around your head. You've got a little bit more of a narrow, almost belt-like thing that you can sort of tuck in. And so these evolve and evolve and evolve, but then you start getting the merchant class. They're not in the fields. They don't care if they have to carry their hood, but they really like the way that badass Jerry looks. Man, the ladies love him. I think I kind of want to look like a Jerry, but, spend like a Steve. And so... So then Steve starts adding the liripipe, and he says, well, I never wear the hood. I'm not a working man. I think I'll just stitch the liripipe in. And so as it evolves and then it turns into, what you're seeing with Quirrell, or, there's a million great examples. People started stuffing them so that you have that sort of puffed ring around your head and you're wrapping your material around it. Eventually it's all sewn together and you're really just putting a hat on. But I just think it's so interesting that it started with like the working man's contraption and then evolves into the thing that the person in the room you should be most impressed by is wearing.
So obviously that hat evolved out of a need, and this might be slightly off topic, but it's about hats. Let's use Peter Pan cartoon, for example. Smee has that long striped hat. It's almost like a bed cap.
Mm-hmm, like a stocking cap. It's knitted.
Well, remember when I came over for your husband's birthday? And I just have to tell the story. It's my favorite story to tell. It's the best. She's like, hey, do you want to come over for your husband's birthday? We're going to cook. I'm like, yes, man, I haven't been over in a while. And she says, the pirates will be here.
And I'm just trying to give you a heads up that there are other friends that will be here as well, just so that if you walk into a full house, you're not surprised. That just seems polite.
It is polite. It's, the pirates. So anyways, I show up. Luckily, there's two other ladies that I do know very well here. And there's a lot of people here, but there's one guy, and he's sitting on the couch, and he's wearing a long striped hat. And now I realize that it was like a pirate hat. But when I saw it, I'm so glad I didn't say anything. I don't know how many people know what Meow Wolf is. If you don't know, look it up and make plans to attend. But Meow Wolf sells something called the Experience Tube, and it's a long tube of fabric with stripes, and it's kind of a joke. One person puts their face in one end and the other puts their face in the other end, and then you have an experience, and that experience is being free from distractions while talking to someone,
but also probably concentrating on the quality of someone's breath, depending on how that goes.
Hopefully it's far enough apart for that, but yes.
It's the first thing I thought of.
But honestly, I almost was like, oh my goodness, is that the Experience Tube from Meow Wolf? And I didn't, because everyone seemed far cooler than I was. And then, like, 20 minutes later, I realized, oh, these are the pirates, and he's wearing a pirate hat. Anyways.
And for context, the pirates are a group of friends that came over every week to just kind of do the same thing that we do here, talk about history, do fun sparring. We do axe throwing is my particular love. Things that you wouldn't find in a normal social setting, we actually kind of enjoy hosting.
Well, they have a very cool backyard that's perfect for these kind of things.
We've started calling it the lifeboat for this year because it's less structured now, but we just sort of still love having the house open that once a week. So it's the once a week lifeboat.
Yeah. So what about a pirate's hat?
The knitted hat. It just made me think of something so funny that in at least Elizabethan era and definitely quite a bit previous, knitting was a man's profession. It was a gilded profession. It was something that you had to apprentice for. It was very, very much knitting of caps. The Knitters Guild was a thing.
Wow.
It was very much a man's profession. So any men out there that are thinking of taking up knitting, it is actually very traditionally manly if you were on the fence. Also, it's very fun.
It's interesting also to know how many guilds there used to be.
Yes.
In the Gilded Age, which I watch, someone invents basically the precursor to the modern alarm clock, but he can't get a patent on it because he's a servant and it has to be like the such and such clockmakers guild.
Right. You have to have guild backing because that's how they control commerce at that point.
Wow.
Knitters were in a little bit of trouble during Elizabeth's reign. She actually tried to codify a law that everyone was required to both own and regularly wear a woolen cap.
Why?
To support the Knitters Guild that was in trouble because the prevalence of knitted caps was going down. So that's them trying to control both commerce and fashion to prop up this guild because the taxes that are coming out of that are one of the major sources of income for the country.
As an American, can you imagine if Anna Wintour was like, yo, Congress, the sock industry is going down. I need you to tell everyone they have to wear socks and these fashionable ones. As an American, 90% of the people would be like, I hate socks, and you cannot make me wear them.
So
no matter what.
Tevas would be a patriotic matter.
If you wear Tevas, it's the same vibe. No, I'm just kidding.
Right, no.
I was looking at some cute Tevas today. Anyways, back to fashion.
Well, the third one, because I was trying to think of a third one to kind of go along with the story. Snoods were the first thing that I thought of.
I'm sorry, Sneeds? Do you mean Sneeds from the Lorax?
No, but they are adorable.
What? What's a snood?
A snood actually is what I was wearing when you arrived here today. That long kind of cloth thing that I put my hair in.
Oh!
So snoods, that's another one that is so common, so ubiquitous, because ladies, it is, at the end of the day, just so convenient to tie your hair back, to get it all out of your way. You're doing all of these things to facilitate living that we do automatically now.
Yeah.
Having your hair down and loose is a pain in the ass. It also says things about you in societies where women traditionally cover their hair, which I'm sorry was all of us up until very recently. But everybody still wears snoods. I mean, you can kind of understand why they got rid of the term.
It's a funny term.
I think the best example of it is if you think about like Louisa May Alcott characters, that netting that they've caught their hair up into.
Oh, yeah.
That's a snood. That's a really fancy example. The netting.
I was going to say, in my part of the tracks, we call that a hairnet. Okay, that makes sense. And I mean, yeah, this morning I had my hair down. I had an interview. And as soon as it was over, I didn't even look. I just grabbed a hair tie and pulled it right back.
And I do the same thing every morning. I had a really funny incident with a friend of ours that was here right before I was going to visit my parents. And I was just sort of puttering around post-shower and getting ready to leave. And so I put my hair up in my snood. And mine, it covers basically from right above the eyebrows to all the way back and tucks all over your head. There's a million versions. Every culture has a very similar thing. Mine's just like a sleeve that I tuck in. And I put it on, and she sort of looked at me and said, oh, because she knows my parents are quite religious.
Oh, no.
She said, oh, do you have to cover your hair before you visit your parents? I'm like, no, honey, I'm drying it. I'd like to go outside for a few minutes, and I don't really want wet ears. It's a practicality for me. It was so cute.
This sounds like something someone would ask me.
Do you have to cover your hair before you? No, they don't care. Actually, my dad wishes I'd left my hair down.
Oh, that's so funny.
Isn't that cute?
Yeah. The netting things, like, now that we're talking about Little Women characters, I'm imagining those, they're actually quite fashionable.
They really are. There's something that comes back so much. I think they get a little over-associated with the sort of, like, straight-laced up 19th century sort of thing. But the thing is we're only thinking of that one interpretation of it. It's that those tuck-over head coverings are of all kinds of materials. It doesn't have to be the netting. Some people attach them to headbands. It's very likely to be the backing of the French hood.
Okay.
Which was considered racy because it shows the very front part of your hair. Oh my goodness.
I have a hair covering, like a sleeping bonnet, and I'm pretty sure it was probably originally made for people with, what is it called, 4C?
Oh, yeah, just like quite a bit more curly. Because she does have very curly hair.
And it's very dry.
And so it's perfectly appropriate usage, but yeah, it's not really marketed,
It is now. Like, it's much easier to find them now.
Because
people talk about it. So I do see a lot of them now, and they're really nice ones are made of silk because that's the best for your hair. Oh, you know who wears one that most people, not you, Rose, would know? Northwest. She's always got one on. That would be Kim and Kay's.
Oh, you could hear the blank look on my face.
Yes.
I know.
So their daughter wears one because she's got very long hair, I think. I don't really know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I wear, but only around the house.
Mm-hmm. I don't tend to wear mine out much. I think partially because I think I lean a little bit more towards the sister wifey look of things. And I don't try to put my hand on that scale any harder than I have to. It's the same reason I won't wear several things.
I would like to tell you how back in fashion denim skirts are. I ordered 5 last night. I did a shopping haul last night. But they probably had, the website I was on probably had 75 different types of denim skirts. And I loved every single one of them.
And denim skirts, like, they were fine when we were growing up, but it was basically the thing you wore to make your mom happy when you were visiting religious houses overseas. And this is actually very good advice. It's some of the best advice I've ever gotten from my mom was that when you're visiting someone else's church, especially for tourism purposes, obviously be respectful, but you will wear a skirt that is modest, and you will always carry a scarf with you because if they ask you to cover your head, you will.
Yeah, exactly. If you're going into someone else's place,
right.
Absolutely.
The utmost respect, because you're allowing me to see these treasures of art. You absolutely have the right to continue using the space in the way that it was built to be used.
Yeah, very much. So for my growing up, I never minded having denim skirts. And yes, I did as a teenager start associating them with church. But I've always kind of liked them because I'm a big blue jeans person. Like, I will wear blue jeans all the time. I may have also bought a denim dress that's like overalls, but a skirt. But for a long time, it definitely had that like sister wife connotation. I keep seeing them come back in. A couple years ago, I saw like a couple of celebrities wearing them, which I knew meant in a few years I'll be able to buy them anywhere. Target's got a bunch of them. Like, they're everywhere now. And I mean, I'm probably not going to wear a cute little cropped tee that looks so cute with them because I wear to church a lot. But yeah, I like them.
I think probably my favorite college outfit was a denim mini skirt and a tank top turtleneck.
Yes, queen.
Oh my goodness. I was the height of 2003.
That's amazing. I, in the 7th grade, I believe, had a denim on denim outfit. It was denim shorts and a matching like baggy denim top. It was baggy because that was in the very early 90s, I believe. Like crisscross, that kind of style was in. I recently saw someone post a picture of, I don't remember who, some celebrity type figure. And they were like, wow, they can't even get an outfit that fits. And I'm like, excuse me. Early 90s rap would beg to differ.
I do not agree with that. Oh, throwing shade for being slightly outside of the cycle. Like, I'm sorry, fashion is cyclical too. I get excited every couple of years. Suddenly everything I like to wear is slightly affordable again, and I load up and continue doing my thing. But like, my husband wears JNCOs religiously now because they came back out. It wasn't a thing for a very long time.
Yeah, you had to like hoard them.
And he got so much shit from various people. It was like, oh, JNCOs, wow, what is it, the 90s, throwback time? And you wait a year, and he has people stop him all the time. Bro, are those actual JNCOs? That's amazing. And you always hear a story about them in high school or college or something, and it's actually like this really great social moment.
My friend has a 16-year-old son, and they were back in her hometown a couple weekends ago, and she found at her mom's house like a bin of her old clothes, and he pulled out her JNCOs, and he was so excited, and he is wearing them now. But he kind of doesn't believe that his mom would ever be so cool.
Like, going through the closet when I was a teenager and pulling out my mom's 70s stuff. Like, oh, this is great. You wore this? Can I wear it? Oh my gosh.
My daughter was like that. She went to college in that time when it was like people dress like grandmas. What do they call it? Grandma core or something?
Grandma chic or something.
Yeah, and my child was always like, look at this adorable shirtwaist dress with my socks and sandals. And I would be like, girl, are you kidding me?
These are the things I actively tried to avoid as hand-me-downs.
Yes, but then if I ever had to show up to pick her up from campus, that's what all the other university students are wearing.
I had somebody call me once, my style is executive bohemian. And I think I really own that.
My daughter called you like a funky pirate or something.
Which I'll also own. I think that's fairly accurate. Lots of flowy.
Fashion is so interesting, and just looking at the dresses in the famous painting.
Arnolfini.
Yes.
I'm going to say that right at least once before we're done.
Like, they're not something I would wear in public, but I wear it to the Met Gala.
Oh, no question. Especially
Absolutely.
those really long draped sleeves with the fur. And everything in that painting has a secondary meaning, too. The fur lining around the edges just screams that I first of all have wealth, and second of all have the clout to ignore sumptuary laws. See, this is the same blank look that I had with Northwest. So sumptuary law, it's related to the you must wear a knit hat because we need to sell them, laws.
Okay.
The sumptuary law says that you have to meet a certain level of parameters in order to be allowed to wear a thing. They become a whole lot more prevalent right after the plague because you have a lower population with the same amount of resources. So there's less resource competition. All of a sudden, Jerry, with his burly ass, has pointy shoes that are longer than the pointy shoes of the guy who owns his land.
How dare he?
How dare he? The audacity. Jerry, we're going to go to my local equivalent of a congressman, and we're going to get them to pass a sumptuary law. And Jerry can only wear 3-inch toes because he is not of the social class to be able to extend the toes of his shoes.
Wow.
So the fur there, which is gray squirrel fur, which is funny now. If you
right?
showed somebody something and said, this is genuine gray squirrel fur, you'd kind of get that, oh dear look.
Yeah.
That was extremely posh. So gray squirrel, known as ver, that's one of the things that sumptuary laws regulated was how much ver you were allowed to use per your social station. So the fact that she's got ver up around her neck, she's got it around her hemline with all of that shit she's walking through and no chokings in sight.
She never leaves the house.
No, absolutely not.
That is wild. It reminds me of when my friend wanted to go into the Chanel store in Paris, and I didn't really plan on going in with her. I was like really tired by this point. The doorman kind of looked at me and shook his head no.
And you don't even really think to question it at that point. You just sort of looked at it, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Which, again, that was fine. But it's interesting. A lot of times I see on Reddit in Ask an American, like about Americans and our view on like a class system.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the answers are always some kind of variant of, you weird Europeans are so obsessed, and not just the Europeans, are so obsessed with your class system, but that's not really how we roll. Sure, you've got your Kardashians and your Congress people and your Bezos, but like the rest of us do not care.
I always hate to disagree with you now.
No, tell me.
I think that we just basically don't like thinking or talking about a class system. It's not that it doesn't exist in our country. It's just that no society is without a class system. Some are better than others. But I'm sorry, when we live in a country where food deserts exist, classes also exist.
That is very true. I think I was thinking more about like specific to fashion and like rules being made around what we can and cannot do, because if you're not American, tell us we can't do something.
That's the only thing they want to do.
Why do you think I have TikTok?
Why do you think they don't tell them you can't do something? They just make it impossible to do the thing that they would like you to steer away from.
Yep.
Because we don't like to talk about it.
We don't like to, and we don't like to have rules. Like, if you don't know this, apparently the seatbelt law was enacted or enforced around the time you couldn't drink alcohol while operating a vehicle, or at least in a vehicle.
The laws are both newer than we
like to. They both happened, I think, in a fairly close fashion, but you can find old videos of people saying, I like to have a drink on my drive home, and now they're telling me I can't do that and I have to wear a seatbelt. How dare the government overstep? But it probably does stem out of things like this. Mm-hmm. No, Rose, y'all can't wear your Converse more than 1-inch platform high because the 2-inch platform Converse are for rich people.
But what about all the shame?
Right. Fellow tea lovers, before you go, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.